The topic of today's discussion is compatibility in marriage. It's quite an open topic. It's a subject, but there's no specific angle on it there. Okay. Well, last time we opened with Tapan Mishra Prabhu, who had done his homework a bit. So let's open with him again. And his homework formed the basis for our ongoing discussion. So please, Tapan Mishra Prabhu, speak about compatibility in marriage.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Guru Maharaj. So we like to begin this discussion and with the point that there are various ways in which traditionally in Vedic marriage compatibility was ensured. There was an attempt to find out whether the to-be husband and wife are compatible. But I want to mention something from experience personally and that of other devotees and even normal people from the secular world that I've interacted with, that irrespective of whatever checks we may undertake, when two individuals come together, there will be differences, and married life is contingent on tolerance and working together. So, whatever we discuss here, whatever is offered, does not necessarily mean that there is perfect uh, compatibility, except in very, very exceptional cases, which cannot be denied. But any discussion like this, we should start with understanding that there has to be tolerance, understanding of our duties, and emphasis on our duty and not so much on differences. So, with that, we felt that traditionally
Emphasis on our?
emphasis on our duty
Yeah.
that
Okay.
we discussed we had in our previous discussion, we covered the topic about how we need to ensure that everybody performs their duty. If that remains as a foundation of any marriage, then incompatible situations can be overcome, or incompatibility on different fronts can be overcome. We felt that there are three areas in which, broad areas, as Guru Maharaj mentioned, broad areas in which compatibility was sort of checked. And I'll request Indira Sakhi Devi to introduce those areas.
So of course, traditionally there's astrological matching of the charts, which is rather important because it does give an indication of the compatibility. It's important to get this done from a person who's expert in this, so that is required. And the other thing that was done traditionally was that the alliance was sought from similar backgrounds. So it's become quite uh, it's the accepted idea that it doesn't matter, and of course the secular idea is love conquers all, and a somewhat similar idea is there amongst devotees that so long as we are in ISKCON following the philosophy, backgrounds don't matter so much. In one sense, that is true because we have seen devotees from diverse backgrounds coming together in a Krishna conscious marriage and making a success of it. But from personal experience, it's an uphill task if you are from rather diverse backgrounds. So that's another aspect that should be taken into consideration if possible, that there should be similar backgrounds, which means similar language, at least from the same country, and financial background, so that at least one has an understanding of how each of them have grown up and what value systems they adhere to.
And similar background could also indicate something as simple as what prasad or food one eats. I mean, in households, there could be issue. It was very common when initially these intercaste or interreligion marriages began in India. If certain people were coming from south of India and they were marrying somebody from North India, there used to be a huge problem. So, when you So
Why?
something as basic.
Can you explain that? I can understand, but just explain it.
So it is because the taste, the way food is prepared is very, very different. Used to be very different between south of India and north of India. The north belt, a very gross example, north belt is used to eating chapatis, bread. The southern belt, there is emphasis on rice and rice preparations. So the reason I took this example is just to highlight that how on something as basic as something that most people will know at least three times together, prasad, there can be difference of opinion. If you're living in a larger family, then this gets escalated because there are other people who will then start complaining about it. There is also the notion of cultural backgrounds, how you dress yourself, what norms you follow with between husband and wife or with the larger family. All of these were typical in different parts of India and also in different parts of the world. So, background, if we really go back in far, far history, of course, this was embedded in terms of which Varna you come from. So the compatibility was sought within the Varnas. There were rules of who a higher Varna could marry, who they should not marry, like that. But that system has completely broken down. And the main point that we want to say at the outset, that this whole idea that just love or affection in the beginning is a very romantic idea, because when you start living under the same roof, the differences, they become highlighted. So it's better that they are matched beforehand.
Yeah. So, astrology and matching of backgrounds. And again, traditionally, because the marriages happen, that it would be there would be a person in between who would say, "Oh, we think your daughter would be good for so and so's son because they are similar in temperament, or their temperaments would match," like that. So, since that is not happening these days, such kind of things are rare. So devotees, some in various communities, devotees have come up with a questionnaire which helps you to understand the other person from various points of various aspects of his life, from sadhana to what is his background, what are his opinion about various things, and what are his or her expectations with marriage. So this kind of questionnaire also helps them to understand better what they are getting into, and I believe it's helpful in certain situations.
And what
In
not to get
contrast, if
into.
we see,
And what not to
sorry,
get
Guru.
into. What not to
Yes,
get into.
yes. Sometimes it can highlight glaring differences which you would like to avoid.
Yeah, someone
In
likes
addition,
very, very spicy food and the other likes very bland food, and that can be enough to make life miserable at home. What to mention things like political differences, attitudes. Yeah, go on, please.
yes, and what we notice, Guru Maharaj, just to wrap up, that in today's world, the so-called matchmaking services, websites, etc., the sort of information they publish and the sort of information people look for compatibility is very superfluous. They would like to see the picture of a person for physical appearance. They like to see the wealth or money that they have and what job that they're performing, not understanding that most of these things are, except for appearance, which is to do with one's sexual interaction with the person mostly. The rest of the things are external to marriage, very much external. They're very narrow, very materially motivated parameters to measure. Rarely in today's world, in these matchmaking service in the secular world, or what the websites publish, does anybody write about the character of the person, their temperament, what their aspirations are, even morally speaking. So we just wanted to contrast that uh, First, people don't pay attention to compatibility. If they pay attention to compatibility, they're paying attention to parameters which are just going to be so superfluous in a daily interaction. And what to say of highlighting the great science that existed before and the depth in which it was done. And results speak for themselves. Previously, we had marriages which lasted throughout their lives. Now we have marriages which are incompatible, and some statistics are, if you look at some countries, there are more failed marriages than successful marriages in most cases. So we pause here with that a broad understanding of where how far wrong we have gone with compatibility and what could be considered.
Okay, next I'm going to ask Gopalacharya to speak. Gopalacharya Prabhu. Now, you spoke about how previously, and even up to the present time in India, divorce doesn't happen much, and presumed due to good compatibility. But even in most of the Western world, that was true. Gopalacharya Prabhu is from Poland, and I presume, because I know Ireland, which was previously a very staunchly Roman Catholic country, and Poland still is a staunchly Roman Catholic country, and divorce was practically, it just didn't happen, practically speaking. It's more now. Well, in Ireland, the Catholic Church has been practically thrown out by the present generation, but in Poland, still the young generation identify with it. It's part of Polish identity. Maybe you could, when you're speaking, Gopalacharya Prabhu, you could speak something about that, how even in the Mleccha countries, with religion, certainly, but without astrological matching or any kind of matching. One thing that it used to be in Ireland, and this is going back maybe 2 generations or more, is that you'd have to get your parents' permission to marry a certain person. Both the boy and the girl would have to get permission, although they found out their partners by themselves. Anyway, that's just a few thoughts, and I'll ask Gopalacharya Prabhu to speak now.
Hare Krishna. Yes, as for the divorce in Poland, in Catholic country, I guess there's this very strong idea which people still identify a lot with, is that divorce is not a solution. I mean, problems may be there, but that's not something that we should even consider. Of course, nowadays, due to modern propaganda and all those things that come in with the modern culture and those educational ideas, as we have seen in the definition of marriage yesterday, as you very much pointed out, it's kind of insidious ideas that creep in a very subtle way. They slowly seem to be destroying that fabric of culture that used to be there. But due to religious values and also culture, it was something that wasn't considered as a solution. They say it even during marriage ceremony in Poland that whatever God binds, man should not, how to say?
Not undo.
Yeah, we shouldn't undo it. Yes, what's done by God, we should not undo.
And there's also that in sickness or in health, in poverty or in wealth, through thick and thin, in health or sickness, until death us do part. And that's
this is actually there is this sense of duty. Actually, yesterday my father called me And he told me about my auntie, who is now 80 years old, and her husband is 84, and he is at the moment basically just vegetable due to Alzheimer's disease. But calling her all the time, my father told him that he calls her all the time, 24 hours a day, but she is just doing everything she can to make him comfortable and happy. And she told my father that, yeah, I'm happy to do it because this is my husband, this is my duty. So I was thinking that that's interesting, that that spirit is there. She's just sacrificing, and it's a very difficult situation. She's 80 years old, and she has to be doing all the time so many things around a person who barely can recognize her, or even at times I think he doesn't. But yeah, but that sense of duty, and it comes from religious sentiment, and also from that culture, that this is something you have to do. There's no option. There's no alternative to that. I guess this is the feeling that people wouldn't consider abandoning duties or divorcing or whatever, because it's just not the option. And this is one thing that would help ISKCON, and this is something that you, Guru Maharaj, you stress so much also in your teachings to your disciples, that okay, problems are there, but divorce is not an option. I remember many years ago, in the beginning of my marriage, we also had some differences and some issues, and you told us very emphatically that just don't consider that at all, because my wife sometimes she would mentioned this idea, but then we stopped thinking. We stopped considering this. Okay, this is not the solution. We have to look for another solution. It help us to go through all those whatever difficulties we had, and to iron out all those difficulties.
Are you happy for that now?
Yes, of course. Of course we're happy. No, it would have been disaster. I mean, yeah, it wouldn't be. We know from experience that those who did go that way, it didn't help them at all. Divorce never helps. People become usually very depressed, and it doesn't help anyone really. So I think that establishing that culture is very important, and that understanding that in spite of all the difficulties, because it's part of life. Difficulties are part of life, as Prabhupada mentioned before. Even if we are compatible, like my own horoscope with my wife is quite compatible. It's quite, but there's one aspect there which is not, and but we got insight into that from an astrologer. He told us what to do, how to work around it, and it was really helpful and really helped us. So it's not a big issue. But the point is that even if we are compatible, we still do have differences. And but it doesn't mean that it's an allowance to divorce or separate in any way. We should just try to stick together and work on these things, and in a way they are also helpful. Problems and difficulties and differences, they help us to work on our own anarthas, which is part of Krishna consciousness. So yeah, this is what I can say about this. And regarding I wanted to just add for the compatibility. Compatibility, it is very important in the sense that I see that all the devotees that I've been in touch with who had any difficulties in their marriages, usually it is due to incompatibility and the fact that they were not properly entering the ashram. They haven't really gone through the compatibility or proper astrological considerations, or maybe even they knew about it but they just disregarded them, and they thought, no, anyway, we'll work it out. Yes, due to Krishna consciousness we'll be able to overcome all the difficulties. So there was this idea of it's a kind of illusion that we sometimes overestimate ourselves or underestimate the influence of Maya. and later we just have to suffer the consequences of it. So usually those devotees who have difficulties in their marriages, it is due to incompatibility. So it is very important to actually go through compatibility check, which is not just astrological, but as was mentioned by other devotees, also having one guru that wasn't mentioned, but I would like to add to that can also be helpful, because there are so many differences on that level as well. And it may be very difficult if if we have different gurus who preach differently. They have different style of preaching, they recommend different things, and so those philosophical differences can be also difficult to overcome. But we don't go very deeply into the subject, but it's a fact that there could be very serious differences there. The whole mood of service, how to serve. Also, the interest in devotional service. I mean, some devotees are interested in pujari service, for example, more than preaching. So that is also consideration. What kind of services we are interested in, and that can be very helpful if that orientation is also similar. And also that is something that maybe we wouldn't like to mention, as it should be obvious to everyone, but for regulative principles and 16 rounds, not everyone is really interested in following on that level. So this also should be discussed. And the position of Srila Prabhupada in one's life and his teachings. So on one hand, we ideally we should be willing to just follow Srila Prabhupada and follow for rules and regulations and everything, but the reality is that there are many devotees who are not 100% interested to follow exactly the way we would like to see them. So better to know about it, to avoid such association. Actually, for someone who is serious about his spiritual life, he should have someone who is at least agreeing to that fact that one is serious. Even if the other person is not so serious, she or he should be able to understand that this other person wants to follow very strictly Krishna consciousness, because otherwise it is going to be also a disastrous match or mismatch or whatever. So there are many aspects of compatibility which should be tackled beforehand. And as in the Vedic society used to be done by the parents, we don't have that Vedic society. We don't have that background. We don't have parents who can do it for us. Leaders of ISKCON, sometimes they do not such a good job about that. There are cases which we heard about that leaders, they were thinking if they're incompatible, they will have a good experience of what material life is. It is going to be good for their spiritual life. So let them marry because they are not compatible. So I mean, so we can't trust that. Or sometimes just for the sake of institutional, smoothness of service or whatever, things are not considered very deeply. Just let someone marry with this one, that person. Let's just have it off our heads. We don't want to deal too much with it. So that's why I think we should have some kind of Grhastha support system for those who are to be married, and there should be there should be so many things considered, and a lot of help should be given to the prospective Grihastas. Something that can replace that system which is not in place at the moment. And my own experience from my own life is also that living just with wife and children very often, myself as a husband, I need to become more than that, because we don't have our aunties and grannies to help wives. So then we also have to take it upon ourselves. We have to help. We have to extend more, and it's not very easy. But we need to understand that we have to do it, because otherwise it's too much for one woman to deal with the whole household, or all household duties and children and this and that without any support from the extended family, which is non-existent. So
All right, thank you. And Nitya Gaura Prabhu?
Tubman Mishra covered a lot of the main points and also some details that I would have said, but uh, I'm not an exemplar because my marriage wasn't purely arranged. I was interested in Vaishnavi because for different reasons, but one of them, I saw she was a really good sadhaka. She was coming regularly to the temple, so I asked approval of the devotees in the community where we were living. However, I did take a lot of I don't know, ideas or from some other devotees who told me that you need to know what expectations you have of each other. So actually, we, without each other knowing, we had a list of questions for each other when we at first formally spoke with each other, and I know that's gone a long way because we could understand that we're going to have a better marriage than without doing that. So that was something. Again, I know this isn't I know we're not trying to encourage this kind of marriage, but
That's
that
maybe the best you can do in America at the present time, in the absence of any formal system.
I think.
Realistically speaking.
Yes, very much.
Please continue.
Yeah, I maybe, and again, I think maybe some of the Gopal Prabhu and Tubman Mishra Prabhu already covered these, but there are definitely other considerations that I don't know will appear in astrology, like the country, because, well, maybe you all don't know, but my wife and myself, to some extent, help or bring the devotees together. She speaks to the Matajis, and I speak to the male devotees. And usually she'll go have the astrology checked with somebody. But I can think of one instance in the recent past where there were two devotees. I think the age was good and the compatibility was good, but because of a single point that the male, the Prabhu wanted to raise his children, to have his children raised either homeschooled or in a traditional way, not send them to public school. And that Mataji did, and that single point was enough to prevent their marriage, which I think is a good idea because that would be a huge conflict. The guru thing, I can think of an example of that too, where the devotee actually gets diverted to another mutt because the wife, in the case I'm thinking of, is taking or is a disciple of a guru outside of ISKCON. So it's kind of sad in that regard that he may not be serving Prabhupada so much as he could be.
I know who you're talking about.
Again, I think a lot of these things were covered, so I don't want to just repeat what was already stated. But yeah, these are some things that I'm thinking about, and I kind of wish Yamasundar Prabhu was here because there's something I don't understand where these things, they exist, but I don't know if those things appear in astrology or if they appear in another way, just like someone living in another country. Is that expensive if the spouse, for example, wants to, go back and see her family or go back and see his family? How does that show up as an incompatibility? But it definitely is some kind of incompatibility or inconvenience in a marriage if somebody moves from another country. Oh, my son is here, maybe. Okay. Hare Krishna.
Did you want to say anything more? Nitya Gaura Prabhu?
Ramesh, I'm sorry. I don't know if it's possible right now. I know Vaishnavi had done some preparation, but she's pacifying Hanuman right now. So
Okay.
maybe
Maybe
after
we can come back to
Nartek
him.
Garanga.
Yeah, Natak Garanga Prabhu. Natak Garanga Prabhu, please speak.
Too much. There can be many reasons for differences between the partners, which can lead to incompatibility. It is like one may be meat eater, another may be vegetarian.
Oh,
Uh,
that's really huge, isn't it? That's really a huge
yeah,
difference. Yeah.
and the wife has to cook meat, even she doesn't like to see that. Still, she has to cook. We have the example of Srila Prabhupada's sister, Pishima. And there may be another reasons like culture-wise, language-wise, food-wise, expectations-wise, worldview-wise. One may be devoted to Krishna, one may be not. One may be socially very active, another may be enunciant type. So all these things lead to incompatibility, and it's very difficult to live with a person day by day, year by year, whom we don't like, whose way of seeing the world is different. So that's why previously, traditionally, elders used to see to it that they are from the same culture. They will be compatible or not through astrologically, and by personally also. Like the middleman used to see that both the families, their traditions, everything they used to check. So that was very good system. Traditionally, it was done, but nowadays it's like by love, they say that everything goes away. But then, as Tapan Mishra Prabhu said, that as the time passes, the reality comes out, and then slowly the married life ends in divorce. So that's why we can see that even Srila Prabhupada, our own Srila Prabhupada, he got an incompatible partner. He very soon in his married life, but he lived with it. And but when it came to like his preaching and his mission, and when she was restricting, she tore the Bhagavad Gita, then Srila Prabhupada left. But at that point, his son was, I think, elder enough to take care of the mother. So, but Srila Prabhupada lived quite a long life with incompatible partner, and we see so many examples from the Shastras. I think Tukaram Maharaj, and so many they just lived. But it's very difficult for women when man is incompatible. Women is religious, devoted, but man is meat eater and beats and uh, say abusive words. So women it becomes more difficult, and so for Grhastha life, the lady should be trained from the childhood to be tolerant, to be in the service attitude. Then only the married life can go successfully, because uh, the man, uh, culturally we learn that women is subordinate to men. So, but this modern so-called culture is killing this basic point that women is subordinate. Because if two persons are living under a roof, both of their egos will fight. Then no one likes to bow down. Then how the things will end? It will end into divorce, day by day, fight, 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 and then ultimately they will decide to leave each other. So the women is trained from the childhood to be subordinate to husband. From the childhood, they were taught and given training that how to serve the man. Even before marriage, when their Vagdan is done, that means when their marriage is fixed, the girl used to go to the boy's house, start serving, and then over a period of time, their marriage happens and the girl moves to the boy's house. So traditionally, that thing was inbuilt, like the girl was trained day by day, year by year. They used to see their mothers, and like that, the whole culture was this. So, And the culture, whole culture, the Varnashram culture was supporting this point that women is subordinate to men. But this modern so-called culture is killing this aspect, and that leads to so many problems. So it's difficult. It's easy to advise, but it's difficult to live with a person who is incompatible. So it's only by support system. The Grhasthas, elder Grhasthas, previously grandmother and other elder members of the society, they used to help so that the married life goes nicely. And they used to guide the men also, women also. But nowadays, because of nuclear families, this there are only two persons, and they are fighting with each other. No one comes in between to stop them or guide them, to counsel them. So at least in the present scenario, we should have mature grihasthas to guide them, help them, because in the starting stage of married life, especially when they don't have kids, uh, there are more fighting. When kids are there, their mind is engaged with the kids. Uh, to some level, fighting reduces because the whole time goes in taking care of kids and to fulfill their demands. But so there is the need of grihasthas who help the married couple, especially in the present scenario. And we should work towards Varnashram Dharma, big families, mother-in-law, father-in-law, all staying in one roof, so that the marriages can run successfully under the guidance of elders. That's all.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Um, as we are living in a Varnashram community, so still we are lot to go ahead in Varnashram, but we are in the very beginning stage. But we can see the benefits of implementing the Varnashram system, the sense of dharma, that that is very important from the beginning, the social system, so that the boys and girls are trained from the very beginning. Boys are also trained. They should be responsible to run the family, to take care of the wife, children, what is their role. And the girls are also trained that to be submissive, to be tolerant, to always serve the husband and even the in-laws also. Sometimes the incompatibility arises due to girl is serving the husband but not compatible with the in-laws. So that should be trained from the very beginning. And second thing, the astrological matching is very important by the parents. That is the role of the parents. That, like the devotees said, the background, the social background, the varnas, everything should be matched. Like in the Shastras, there are two systems of marriage: Pratilom Vivaha and Anulom Vivaha. So, Pratilom Vivaha, the girl is of the higher Varna. So, that is also an incompatible situation. The girl should always be on the lower side regarding the Varna, regarding the education, regarding the financial background, everything. Otherwise, uh, it is difficult for her to be submissive. So, this should also be considered that girl should be on a lower side in every respect from the husband. And third thing that is there, and after astrological matching, after background matching, everything, if it is done, even after marriage, we see that the partner is not very compatible, then we should accept it as a because it is because of our karma, past karma, it is given by God. Then we should accept it, whatever God has given us. We should tolerate it like this, because if we escape from this karmic reaction, everything we got, every relation we got because of past karma, now we are escaping, we are leaving our husband, then we will also get another reaction, karmic reaction. in this life or next life. So that is not the solution. So whatever is due to our karma fal, we should accept, and um, we should also try to see that this every living being is conditioned. Everyone has its shortcomings. We are also conditioned. So everyone is not perfect. So we should be tolerant, and we should develop a habit of seeing good in others. Sometimes we have got a habit to see always faults in others. Like we don't like our husband or wife, then we always see something or other. He is not good. But if we develop a habit of seeing good things, then we can adjust to some things. He has got so many good things, and some points he is not good. That's okay. But the good things we should be happy. Yeah, he is giving us nice facilities. He is caring whenever we need it. Like we can see many good things in every person. Um then it needs maturity actually to deal with an incompatible partner. Yet the graveness of incompatibility is also there. Sometimes the partner is very much aggressive, very much we cannot live with him. Sometimes it is like this, he is breaking all the four rules. Then we can discuss with senior devotees and our spiritual master before taking any major decision. But I want to give some examples from Shastras also, by which we can take inspiration that we can also be tolerant like them. Like Sukanya is there because of her sense of duty. Her husband was not at all incompatible, at all compatible with her, his age, his temper, everything. She was a princess, but still she adjusted. Like Chandili, like Pishima. And one example, my
What was that one you
mother,
said? Chandili?
Chandili, like his husband, her husband was affected by leprosy, and her husband wanted to
Oh,
go to a prostitute, and she took her husband. So that was the character of the ladies earlier. Now it is very difficult for the women to be that much tolerant. One example my mother used to give, my elder sister of my mother. Her husband was also very um, not very good in temperament, not very caring, so many problems. So after her marriage, some months or some years after her marriage, once after fighting, she came to her father's house, but her father quickly told from outside the house only, go back to your home. Never come while fighting. I will come and settle the issue, but never come like this. Don't leave your home. And from outside only, he returned her to her house. So from that example, my mother told, I have also learned, the younger sisters learned, this is the way. We should never leave the husband. So that was the training, the culture, environment, social ethos, like it all affects. So we should develop a environment in our communities in which we should be afraid of doing anything against the dharma. That's all.
all right. Nitya Gaura Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Ah, yeah. So what happened with Hanuman?
Woke up and wanted mama.
Yeah, but where is he now?
He's there's a Mataji here
I see.
who's they're chanting,
Okay.
so he's engaged for now.
He's
I hope
he's
he
adjusted
remains stable.
to others also. Okay, so please tell us what
Yes,
you wanted to say.
over the last 3 to 4 years, not as a constant full-time service, but on and off, I and my Prabhu have helped, at least try to help devotees in terms of finding an appropriate, suitable, compatible spouse. And so I just wanted to share some practical points that I've learned over this time working with some of the Matajis. One of the first things that I ask the Matajis is to be honest with me in terms of what I call deal breakers, considerations that they know for sure they do not want to entertain in terms of characteristics that a potential spouse would have. For example, there was one Mataji from a European country, and she immediately told me, no Indians. And so I didn't ask so much as to why, but I could understand that she just understood that there would be too much of a cultural difference, that she just didn't even want to entertain that. And so that was helpful for me because immediately I could filter out so many potential devotees to even see if they would even be compatible. So there are some such factors that I believe every practicing devotee or anyone who's considering marriage really ask themselves honestly what they want in a spouse. It wouldn't be realistic for practicing devotees to just think that we're not the body, so it doesn't matter, because actually we're not on the transcendental platform. So we do have certain desires and certain preferences. Exactly. One thing I was considering that I've learned in terms of wanting cultural similarities, even if two people speak the same language. I believe it was hearing from our godbrother Bhaktivinoda Tirtha Maharaj. He was explaining in one Bhagavatam class how conceptual language is. And so even two people can speak the same language, but it could be difficult to understand each other, or we've even had experiences where we misunderstand each other. Just simple phrases. We may not always be clearly explaining what's on our mind. And so for that reason, a cultural background that is similar can be very helpful. Another consideration in terms of language or place of origin is that when some young devotees, when their parents are very much still involved in their life, it's not really the case with Americans, but with others, particularly from devotees from India, the parents are very concerned that they will be able to communicate with their child's spouse. So if the devotee's parents don't speak English or don't speak Hindi, they only speak their native country language, for example, maybe Gujarati, then if they're concerned that if their spouse marries someone from another country in India, that they will not be able to communicate with them. And they want to be able to, be able to communicate with that part of their family, as well as their grandchildren, because who knows what language the grandchildren will learn. Another consideration I wanted to bring up is that, of course, we should not be so superficial as to stress appearance and physical features, but I have seen and learned that actually by seeing a profile image of someone, if there are shared facial features, you can understand that there are similarities in the two persons, and so that can also be helpful. And I believe that that's also a science that, given the structure of a nose or the chin or the shape of the face, it reveals actually features of that or qualities and characteristics of that person. And so when two people have similar facial features, that can be helpful in understanding that they have some similarities in mood and character. So another one more point I wanted to bring up is that I've also tried to help Matajis who seem to actually be emphasizing too much in wanting. I don't know how to explain it, but almost as if to say, frankly, being too picky, almost as if just trying to find some reason to not want to marry the person or even consider marrying the person. And it could be something as like the last example that I was given was there was someone that is astrologically compatible from the same culture, God siblings. They have the same spiritual master. The age is appropriate. The height is appropriate. Because that's also something that I've seen, generally it may seem very superficial, but it is helpful for the husband to be taller than the wife. Because I've seen an instance where the wife was significantly taller than the husband, and there were just so many conflicts just because of this feeling of, the husband looking up to the wife. But anyway, with this particular Mataji, she explained that even though there was someone that seemed to be so compatible, she said, well, because they're from this particular town in this particular state, those people they tend to be a little bit too emotional. And so I don't, and so it will be difficult to communicate. And I just had to explain that that's just something that you have to learn in marriage or having a relationship with anyone, is learning how to learning about the other person so that you can understand the other person, and then also learning how to communicate with each other. You may also the individual may not themselves be able to express themselves very clearly, and so that's something that's the kind of purification that goes on in marriage, is yourself finding your own faults. And I think that's another point, is that it's very, I try to explain to Matajis that no one in this material world is perfect. That's why we're in the material world. And so that's why it's important to prioritize what we do value in the potential spouse, because there are going to be some things lacking. And so that's why I bring up this point of deal breakers. What some devotees might value how much a husband earns more than how much they're chanting their rounds. And if they're just honest with themselves, then it's a lot more helpful to find the person that they'll get along with, because they personally just want to live comfortably, and it doesn't really matter how seriously we practice Krishna consciousness. So, and vice versa, a husband might just prefer one quality over another. And so to just be able to really consider these things and be honest with themselves and with those that are helping to arrange a marriage is it's very helpful. And I've also seen some disasters occur when two devotees who are compatible, they get along, the ages, everything is in line, but because they don't have a timeline, they don't have like a planned expectation for how long they're going to associate and when they're going to marry, then they get into this weird limbo stage, and then the woman starts feeling insecure whether or not the man wants to marry her or is going to marry her. And so that's something that I have found to be very helpful, is that if in the very beginning, when two persons begin to associate, that it's understood that we are associating only for the purpose of marriage if we find that we do get along and we do want to in fact marry, and that we should give ourselves such and such time, and at the end of such time we should marry, or we should decide not to just stay in this strange limbo boyfriend girlfriend dating situation. And one last thing, recently I know of someone who is divorcing their husband. They're young, they're just in their 30s, they're both devotees. And something that came to mind was that there's this term called burying the hatchet, because to bury the hatchet. We were told that the first year of marriage is the most difficult, because I could understand that, all of the anarchas are going to, all of a sudden you're going to see, everything that you don't like about the other person, and you're going to have to deal with it all at one time. And so there's this phrase called to bury the hatchet. And I just want to encourage anyone who's listening to this that, just as it was already mentioned by other devotees, to be tolerant, but this phrase means to decide not to fight, to bury the hatchet, to put away the weapon. You're making a commitment that no matter what feelings are stirred up, you're not going to argue. You're not going to say harsh words. You're not going to raise your voice. And that can really help, because actually the mode of passion can just overtake the intelligence. Whereas if you just give yourself time to cool off and then you communicate later, you can just move on and realize that whatever little bickering you were doing was over something that was not so serious. Even Srila Prabhupada explains how it's like the banging of two sticks outside. It's not to be taken very seriously. So I'll stop there, but I just wanted to offer those points.
Okay, I'm going to add a few comments based on what I've heard here, not in any particular order. The idea of perfect compatibility is something in movies or fairy stories, although Tapan Mishra did say there are such things as, there are such cases. I think it's only in fairy stories. Maybe Krishna and Rukmini, maybe. Even then, but Krishna got a little bored with all of that. Did you see in the Hindi press that was forwarded to me? This was a few months ago. There was somewhere in Madhya Pradesh or somewhere, some young Muslim woman wanted a divorce. Did any of you see that? Of course, those of you who don't know Hindi wouldn't. She wanted a divorce because she said her marriage was too boring. She said, my husband never fights with me. He helps me with the housework. And she went to the local, she was too boring. And she went, because they're in the village system, there's the local Muslim, whatever. And they said, no, you can't, you're not allowed to divorce. Then she went to the panchayat, or the, what do they call that, with the Hindus, and they said, that's not our jurisdiction. So she thought it was too boring. That it adds a little fun, maybe, if there is some. That's what Krishna said to Rukmini, right? After he was teasing her. He said, husband and wife, they like to have a little quarrel now and then. Mataji Vaishnavi spoke about associating before marriage. This is probably required in the Western world, but traditionally it wasn't there in India. It is now. What are you doing in Nandagram? You recently got 3 couples married. From our point of view, they're still children, but they're married now. We just saw them as children, and now they're married. But I think there was no association before marriage in any of the case. I think in one of the cases, in 2 of the cases, they grew up in the same village, which at least in Gujarat is not considered ideal, although apparently in Andhra Pradesh it's considered acceptable. So it may be in different, but even then they grow up in the same village, but they don't mix, right? They don't know each other hardly at all, because the boys and the girls, they stay quite separate in the village. Please, can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yes, Guru Maharaj. They grew up in the same village, but they never spoke with each other. They
Because
never.
the boys and the girls don't speak with each other at all.
Yes, Guru. And when their marriage was fixed, the Vagdan happened. Then after that, the boy, when he was walking on the street, he was hesitant to pass in front of the house of the girl. He was going from the different side because he came to know that now from this house my wife will be there. So he was not passing by that house. So he was hesitant, and the wife was also very much hesitant. Uh, in the far distant place also, if she sees that my future husband is there, she used to go back to home. So that we saw in the recent past few months, and even like we see in recent marriages, also in the normal world marriages. After marriage, they speak, they eat with each other, and they talk, and so many things. But even after marriage, on the marriage day, they were hesitant to even look to each other. So it's because of the culture in which they grew up, and we all the community members they liked this very much, and we appreciated both of them.
One thing I've seen, and this is likely to be considered one of my famous misogynistic statements, is that sometimes when the girl and the boy they associate before marriage, the girl especially, well, maybe it's because I hear from the male side, but she plays a certain role because she wants to get him. And once she's got him, then her behavior changes. So I've heard that. You don't really know who you're associating with until you're married. That may be there also. Tapan Mishra Prabhu spoke about way back in the past. It used to be like this with the different Varnas. I think that's because you grew up in Delhi. You think that the things you hear about in the Mahabharata, that's way back in the past. But I know India more than you do, in as much as I've traveled widely in the villages, and it still makes a difference. I'm in Tamil Nadu now, and it still makes a difference. And here in caste, marriages is within the caste generally, still. And it does, there's a difference, pronounced difference of culture between different castes, different expectations. Around us, they're living people who are something like, they're not Yadavs exactly, but they're something like Yadavs. They look after cows, and you grow up looking after cows, and you expect your wife, she also knows how to look after cows and how to chop the wood from the tree to make firewood and all definitely. And then within the merchant families, both in North and South India, there's a very different culture and expectation and aspiration in the merchant families. In the North, you have your Marwaris and your Guptas, and here in the South, you have the Chetiyas and the Shetties and all different places. And there's definitely a culture that they value making money, and they have that in their blood, so to speak. I've spoken about that a few times, how you see even the new businesses like the Zomato. There's one of the founders is a Goal, Marwari or Mahesh, whatever. Yeah, they're all Marwari. And then there's something, this electric vehicles. Oh yeah, what's that called? What's it called? Ola. They're making electric vehicles, and it's an Agarwal who's doing the company. So it's very much in their blood and their culture, and the way their aspiration. An Agarwal girl grows up in a background where, of course, there are Agarwals who are medical doctors and professors in universities and all this kind of thing, but that culture is still very strong there among the Vaishyas and Just like you may think that in a Brahmin family they wouldn't want the boy to marry a girl who's a Shudra, from a Shudra background. But it's maybe even stronger the other way, although it's not likely to happen that. But it does happen, that from a Shudra family, they don't want a girl from a Brahmin family. And then they have all these rules they follow, and we don't want that. So caste and the culture that comes with it is still very much a factor. There was a book which I haven't read, which I can't remember the title of even now, Grhastha Social Capital. It was written recently by a professor in Bangalore who was saying that actually the caste system, it's not a blot on India, it's the strength of India. One of the great strengths is that people from the same caste, they help each other, they work together, they have the same kind of culture. They're what's that word? Endogamous group. They marry within the same group, and we see even in India still the Muslims and the Christians. They also have caste. It's maybe not by the same name, but they have caste also. It's very much part of Indian society. So we're talking about Varnashram society and how it's not by birth, but practically speaking, we see that in Indian history and tradition, it is largely by birth. And there wouldn't be the Vajrasuchika Upanishad if it wasn't, because the Vajrasuchika Upanishad speaks, the whole Upanishad is speaking about how different people are born from different, don't follow the exact caste. How, for instance, Rishashringa was born from the horns, the deer, and giving so many examples. Well, that's showing examples of people who they were different from the caste they were born into, which it's the exception proves the rule. That the general rule is that the caste you're born into, it has a certain culture and the way you grow and your aspirations, and it is very helpful. It does become a lot more difficult if people are from a very different, and even among Vaishnavas, the material aspirations are different of those who are born in a Brahmin family and those who are born in a Vaishya family. And definitely Kshatriya, traditional Kshatriyas, they have a different outlook. We find in Mahabharata the queen who's goading her son to go and fight. Kshatriya. Queen means Kshatriya. So that is a strength, actually, and that we could try to rebuild. Although Srila Prabhupada does write in one of his purports that the Varnashram system can easily be revived at any time within India. And I believe that's because the caste system is there. It needs a little tweaking. It shouldn't be that the lower castes are hated. They should be appreciated. They shouldn't be exploited. But that is there. Although Srila Prabhupada also said that the people in India, they like to have a king. They like that culture. But I believe that with more than 50 years of democracy, that's lost a lot. And this democracy nonsense, I mean, it's such a waste of time and money and energy, and so divisive. But the idea of having a king seems to be It's not part of the Indian psyche as it was previously. When India got independence, the Kshatriyas, they were thinking, what's this? We're going to have Nehru as a prime minister. He's a Brahmin. And then as the head of the country, and then we have a Patel as the home minister. What's a Patel? What's a Vaishya going to do? How are they going to run the country? They thought it was ridiculous. Okay, there are a few points. But I just want to say that that the caste, it's not something of the distant past, as maybe people are trying to tell us, but it is very much, it's prominently part of life in India today, and we often see the worst side of that, but there are strengths there also. And one of them is that for marriage, we're talking about marriage, that it makes it easier for people to relate to each other if they're from the same caste, because they had the same kind of background and aspiration. Although in city life, the aspiration and the culture it's becoming somewhat homogeneous. Just get money and enjoy. That's the whole culture can be summed up like that. Other important points made. Astrology is not all in all. People, sometimes devotees seem to think if you're astrologically compatible, that's all in all, but it's not at all. Just for instance, we heard one example that you may be astrologically compatible, but one wants to educate future children in one way and another in another way, and that's enough to make, enough of a serious incompatibility to cause tremendous friction in the marriage if they went ahead with it. So better they don't go ahead with it. Then another thing was mentioned about different kind of food. That's a very big thing in India, actually, because we know that even when devotees go from South India on tour on pilgrimage to Vrindavan, for them to not have South Indian food for one day is very disturbing. Very disturbing to them. You need to bring your own cooks and have South Indian food. Maybe it's all of India is just going to have pizzas in future. But up to the present time, that is a very important consideration. And Bengalis, they can't live without rice, and lots of it. If they don't consider they ate a meal unless there's rice. You can give them 10 chapatis, but as far as they're concerned, they didn't eat anything unless they eat rice. It can come down to things, and apparently this is quite a common complaint, that some men get really disturbed if the house isn't kept clean, which can be very difficult if you've got a bunch of kids running around making things messy all the time, and you have to try to keep your eyes on them all the time so they don't kill each other. And you're only one woman looking after the house. But no, literally that's true. You have to keep an eye on the kids so they don't kill each other or kill themselves. They need supervising. But there's some things like that can really, I know of cases where men get really disturbed because they come back and the house is just complete. It looks like Kiev or something. Or there's a war going on, and it may be also that there is actually a war going on. It's between different kids. Another important point that I see a lot of devotees get wrong is that the compatibility means that the other party should adjust to what I want for my sense gratification. And if I don't get what I want for my sense gratification, then finished, which is a mundane outlook. The idea that we're here together to help each other enjoy this world, well, that is there to some extent. Getting married and you want to live as comfortably as possible. Well, maybe for others it's not that important. Again, you come down to it. It may be that those who are raised in very poor families, they don't expect so much or in terms of comfort. But the idea that we're here to, I'm in this marriage because I want to be happy. And then when the partner doesn't comply with what you expect them to do for sense gratification, for what makes you happy, then you think that's grounds to quit. Some other points, different marriages, a marriage of some of my disciples, when I first met them more than 20 years ago, they told me, and it was pretty obvious, that they're Indians, they're having difficulty in their marriage. And at one point they told me that they went to an astrologer, and he looked at their charts and said, "Who matched your charts? They completely messed up. You're not compatible at all." But they stuck it out. And they're fine. They're older now, of course, than they were 20 years ago. And they're going on, and they seem to be quite happy with each other. And at some point, they just settled into that. And I know another couple who they used to fight quite a lot. And it sounded pretty harsh, although dampatye kolaha, that's mentioned among the things Chanakya Pandit says, don't take it very seriously. Rishi Shraddha, what is that? Ajayodhe Rishi Shraddha Prabhate Megha Garjane Dampatye Kolaha Chaiva Bhavrambe Laghu Kriya. When goats fight, it seems like they're going to maim each other and kill each other, but it comes to nothing. Rishi Shrad, you're invited to a Shrad, please come. And you think, Shrad, we're going to get some good food, but it's a Rishi Shrad, and all you get is a few roots pulled out of the ground. And then you hear the thunder, tremendous thunder in the morning, and you think there's going to be a big rainstorm, but it comes to nothing. And the same thing, fight between husband and wife. Srila Prabhupada gave an example. You can hear it said, "No, you get out of this house. I'm going. I'll never come back." And all that. And 5 minutes later, just woman's cleaning the house and the man's doing what he's doing, and it all comes to nothing. So it's not a big thing. Nothing to take very seriously. So one couple I know, they used to fight a lot, but then they got older and they just adjusted. Maybe others in that situation would have divorced, but they didn't, and they're happy now with each other. It took them quite some time to adjust. Now, this is a very important word, especially for those of you who are not Indians. I'm going to teach you a very important Indian word. It's in every Indian language, and it's very important in Indian marriages. And the word is it derived from Sanskrit? No, the word is adjust. And is that an Indian word? Yes. In any adjust karna parega, you say in Hindi. And it's about everything, not just in marriage, in everything, because India is a crowded country, and if you come from the West, you generally get the impression, you generally land in Bombay or Delhi, and you think it's chaotic, and that's Delhi or Bombay, and then you go to other places, and it's Delhi and Bombay is not at all chaotic compared to other places. It's kind of civilized almost, if you think coming from the West. But this word adjust is in every Indian language, and it, like I say, it's not just for get a seat on the train. Okay, there are already 5 people sitting in a seat that's meant for 3, and someone else comes. Okay, adjust. And somehow or other you squeeze them in. And it's a very important word. The whole concept that just adjust the situation. Okay, we already have 5 people. Now we have to somehow get 1 more on the seat. Okay, and the idea is that we're not just trying to make the situation ideal according to what I want, but the consideration that we have to think of others also. And of course, in the Indian trains, sometimes we see literal physical fights over seats. That's also there. So it's not that everyone's adjusting all the time, but it is an important consideration. So in marriage also. And it's something that if you grow up with, then that's very helpful also. Then that becomes part of your personality. So there are 2 marriages. Then another marriage, I'm going to mention the name this time. This is Naikatma Prabhu, my godbrother, and his wife, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. When he was town president in Denver, I was there quite some years ago. And I mentioned to them that, oh, you're doing pretty good. You're married, and you're still married. It's been 25 years or whatever. I asked, what's your secret? Because they're Americans. And they said that, well, whenever we get in a disagreement, we just laugh about it. We just joke. That's all. That was it. That was the secret. Very simple secret for an American devotee marriage to go on year after year after year. They get into some tension, and then they realize they're getting into some tension, and they just, instead of they joke about it. Exactly how they joke, I don't know. You'd have to ask them. Naikatma Prabhu is one of the brothers. There are 3 brothers who became Prabhupada disciples. One of them is Svavash Prabhu in Los Angeles, who's been the town president there since before some of you on this panel were alive, were born in this body. And he and his wife have been married since before you were born, some of you. And great. You must know them, right? Nitya Gaura Prabhu. I mean, you must know of them because you're in San Diego and they're in Los Angeles. And yeah, they're a very good couple in Krishna consciousness. He manages the temple. He's town president. And Los Angeles temple, it's not a small temple. And she manages the gift shop, which is connected with the restaurant and makes money for the temple. And yeah, it's a very, very good. I mean, these are some ideas. When we think of the West and devotees and it's all a disaster, there are some very good examples which we can look at. And even you can recommend Nitya Gaura and Mataji. You can maybe recommend if couples are having trouble. Well, just give. Of course, you'd have to ask Sravas and Naikatma, and there are quite a few couples there in L.A. who have been together for years and years and years. And maybe you could just ask them for some. What do you suggest? What do you do? What's your secret? Actually, there are quite a few couples in LA who have been serving there together for years. So there's some very good examples there also. An example of a disastrous marriage here in India because of not following astrologer's advice was a major factor, where one devotee, very good devotee, and his wife also, devotee, yeah, but the astrologer, he consulted an astrologer because they were attracted to each other. This was quite some years ago now. And the astrologer told him that you're a devotee, she's a devotee, but your coming together will not be good. It will be a disaster, especially for you. And in capital letters he wrote, do not marry her under any circumstances. That's pretty clear, isn't it? He married her. I won't go into the details of what happened because it might become obvious who we're talking about, but it really was true. So do listen to an astrologer if he gives you a warning. Another thing I sometimes see is devotees, they go to one astrologer and they say, no, it doesn't match. You go to another astrologer, it doesn't match. To go to another astrologer, it doesn't match. And you go to another astrologer, says, yeah, okay, maybe matches a little bit. Said, okay, that's it. We got the clearance. That is foolishness. Another thing I heard, because I do speak to householders about how, yeah, okay, you want to say something, Gopal, in this context?
Just to that point of matching astrologically, Patitapavana Prabhu, your godbrother, who is astrologer, he has a policy that matching, because of the present circumstances, that we don't have the supportive community or elders or the extended families and so on, it's not enough to just have the minimum of compatibility points, but actually it should be more. Because he says when it comes to difficulties, even if there's compatibility, but if it's not strong compatibility, then the spouses will not be able to cope with the difficulty. So his policy is normally 18 points is the possible, but he says minimum 24. This is his policy when he's advising, and if I saw that also, that even initially during initial months of marriage that went ahead, although the points were 18, 19, and the devotee was feeling that actually, the astrologer wasn't really right, it's not so bad. But after some time, it became bad.
Yeah, sometimes it takes a few years.
So it may take some time, because initially due to the chemistry, things may not be that obvious, but after some time, it actually becomes. So we should listen to the astrologer. Really, I'm really convinced about the validity of having astrological compatibility done beforehand, and yeah, in the present circumstances, it should be also quite strong compatibility to make it successful. So I just wanted to add that point, because I think it's quite important also.
Another thing is we should consult a reputable astrologer, because it's quite common, especially nowadays, that someone picks up something from the internet and establishes themselves as an astrologer. They're a quack. And they might learn by experience, but you don't want to be the guinea pig for them to learn by experience. They should be trained, well trained. Traditionally, again, it's by families. The astrologer father, his son becomes an astrologer, like traditionally in the family line. So be careful when you consult an astrologer, to make sure that they have good reputation. Many years ago, one couple came to me. I'd never seen them before. And they told me we're having a lot of difficulty in marriage, and they wanted blessings to divorce. Had their young daughter with them. I said, no way. No such thing. Even if you throw the furniture in the house at each other every day, you've got a daughter now, so no question. So they accepted that, and they're still married. And at one point, they came to me and said that, well, one of them wants to have another child, the other doesn't, or the wife wants to have another child, the husband doesn't. So what should we do? And although it's not really the kind of thing I want to get into, but Srila Prabhupada does say that the husband gives the wife children as she wants to, and she's satisfied with that. So then they had another child. That much faith is there. On the question of different gurus, if they're coming from different gurus, you may try to find the same guru that may make a lot of difference. Maybe, maybe not. It depends on the attitude of the different gurus. Once, some years ago, and it seems often for my disciples it can be difficult to get a compatible spouse with the same guru, namely myself, because I don't have so many disciples, especially in some areas. One young woman at the time got married, and her husband is from a different, initiated by someone else. She asked me what to do. I said, follow your husband. If there's a difference, follow your husband. That's what the wife is supposed to do, because even though there are some differences in outlook between the husband's guru and myself, it's not chasmal. We both teach 4 regulated principles, 16 rounds, rise early in the morning. It's a basic thing. And even in the 4 regs, there may be some differences in how strictly you interpret it. But if you're going into a marriage, you have to stay in a marriage, and the guru of the husband is teaching, go back home, back to Godhead, follow Prabhupada, and so follow him. That's what I... In another case, there was a young woman who had been aspiring to be initiated by me for some years, and then she got engaged to someone who was going to be initiated by, or was initiated by, another guru. And I told her, just take initiation from that guru. That's all. Better. So I presume she did. I didn't see her after that. One thing that Gauranga Prabhu mentioned is that a devotee marrying a non-devotee, very, very difficult. It may be that someone takes, well, this quite often happens, someone takes to Krishna consciousness after marriage and the other spouse doesn't. Can be very, very difficult. That's the kind of thing we should discuss more in future. We're just talking on some very general principles just now. In general, we should try to arrange that devotees marry devotees. In Bangladesh years ago, I was speaking with one of the leaders there, and he said that we don't recommend young girls to be initiated. Let them get married first, because we had so much experience that they get married and the families arrange their marriage. They're married to a non-devotee who's eating fish, which is common in Bengal, and then the girl just has no recourse, and they're spoiled. The girls are spoiled after marriage. So he was making that point. It may seem harsh, but what to do? In Mayapur, so I heard years ago, this was when, this was Mayapur at a time that, well, now if we see Mayapur and we think back to the 1970s, we couldn't imagine it would be like that, like it is now. when we were there in the 1970s. And those of you who are living in Mayapur now, you can hardly imagine what it was like in the 1970s. We had a lot of Bangladesh refugees there. They'd come and they'd joined. The devotees, the whole of Surubganj. You know Surubganj, they do all this click, click, clack, clack, click, click, clack, clack when you go off to Surubganj. Actually, I think that's going down now, but the handloom. They all came from Bangladesh. They're all settled there. And they're devotees. So some of them joined the ISKCON setup there. And Srila Prabhupada, apparently, so I heard, he said that when he was asked what it about all these girls, because at that time they generally have large families, and lots of girls. Prabhupada said, you married them off to some local men. Just find someone to marry them to. But generally you want to see that both should be devotees. What to do if there's high incompatibility? That this point has already been discussed, that you go on with it anyway. You try to before marriage get it right, and if not, then what to do. It may be that people change afterwards, also after marriage. That's more common, it seems, in the Western world, with so much freedom. Again, I've been interested in these things since a young age, actually, although I didn't marry, as you know. But I was speaking about this with one of my uncles before I joined the movement. And he said, from Irish Catholic family, and he said, he used this term, you just have to accept your lot. In other words, what fate has given you, you just have to accept it. And we were specifically talking about marriage. And later I thought, well, maybe he didn't get on that well with his wife. He was a very jolly, he's always joking around. His wife was quite heavy, quite harsh. They were living in an IRA area of Belfast. It was ruled by the IRA, Irish Republican Army. There was a virtual war going on at the time. So he said, you just accept your lot, that's all. And he was quite happy with that. It seemed like his own marriage, it was pretty tough in many ways. But you just accept your lot, and he was happy. Grhastha support system, we heard talk about that. Now, Gopalacharya Prabhu, you're living in that colony. Are you living in the Vrindavan colony in Salem, or do you have a house? You're living in there. So we have a plot of land which is owned, I'm not exactly sure the setup, but it's 5 minutes walk from our ISKCON Salem temple. And the whole colony, it's not huge, there are about, 20 families living there? Approximately 20 families. And there are more outside the colony. So you do have you don't have in-laws and grandmothers and this and that in your case. But you do have many Grhasthas living around you. And in Mayapur, Tapan Mishra Prabhu, many Grhasthas living around you. Maybe too many, because when you have a big community, people tend to become more impersonal. But as we've heard in these talks, the last time in Salem, the community there, the kids all run around and play with each other. So you have many parents, so to speak, in Salem, where there's a smaller community. And I know that from past experience that not in Salem in particular, but when there are many kids all living with their families, then in many cases, Well, it would be considered quite proper for if one kid does something wrong and they're playing in some part where their own parents are there, then the parents of some other kid will chastise them. And that's quite okay, and that's quite accepted. So you have a virtual support system there. Not virtual, because that's nowadays connected with the internet, but you have factually, although it's not exactly by the family line, but that was traditionally also the village. It takes a village to raise a child, right? And of course, Nata Gauranga Prabhu is living, we're getting a little late here. I have to finish soon. Nata Gauranga Prabhu is living in a village that was put together of Vaishnavas. There was no village there before. You didn't move into a village. You made a village. So you have many families living together. Does that help with support? The different, although you don't have exactly within Nata Gauranga, you have just in an adjacent house, you have your wife's parents living there, right? So they also help to look after the kids and this and that. So any comments about that briefly? And Nitya Gaura, you're hoping for some more Grhasthas. Actually, one senior Grhastha couple are moving there soon, right? That'll be very, very helpful. Apurva Prabhu and his wife. But you haven't had that up till now in Atlanta.
Not in Atlanta.
No, Gumaraj, not in Atlanta. It's a little strange. Yeah, we're the only not the only married people coming to the temple, but the only I think that are initiated that regularly come to the temple. It's very strange. I feel I'm quite young to be the only married man in the congregation.
So any few words about that from Gopalacharya Nata Gauranga Prabhu? Tapan, is my conjecture correct that you don't have much of a support system because it's a bit impersonal with so many people there? Is that true or not?
Maharaj, my wife says no, I say yes. So there is incompatibility coming into the picture. But my view of Sridham Mayapur is that while there are many, many devotees, but they're coming from various different backgrounds. Those who stay here for longer periods are few. There's a lot of flux. Those with children, there's a lot of flux. So I believe if one has to be selective. One has to be selective in what association one takes. In that regard, I think it gets a bit thin in terms of the number of people that you can associate with. But if you just count the number of families, etc., there'll be quite a bit. So in that sense, if you're lucky enough to find devotee couple who have the same values in devotional service as yourself, then you can coalesce, you can form a community with them. But in general, you are right, Guru Maharaj, that happens to be the situation. It's just too big a community. It's just too big to come together at the present moment.
Well, there are many Bengali families who live they all squash together in what some people refer to as,
yes.
They refer to as the Bengali slum because they're lower income or whatever. And from what I see, they're very Bengali village people. They're all come from village. So maybe that happens more among themselves.
They
kids
help each other.
They help each other. They fight with each other in their own way, and they go on like that. Typical Bengali village. Sometimes they're yelling at each other, and then when they do things, then they do things together, and they just go on like that. So that comes very naturally to what I see to Bengali villages. But and then the Russians are there, and they help each other. From what I've seen, they're very helpful to each other, and they may be helpful to others also. I'm not sure. But you're in the.
And then there's also the South Indian. There's a group of South Indian devotees. They come together. So there are small support groups, but it's not very organized. It's very informal.
Well, that's how it is traditionally, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, there's some formality with the family and the panchayat and this and that. But a lot of it is informal but understood. But you're in the Itara section. You know that word Itara comes up in Sanskrit a lot. Krishna Itara, Imang hi Vishwang Bhagavan Nivetara. Itara means everything else. You're not part of a group, so to speak. Nata Gauranga Prabhu, you want to say anything about that?
Yes, Guru Maharaj.
You're all helping each other.
Maharaj, Nandagram is each other, especially the elder members like my mother-in-law, father-in-law, Radha, Darshan Mataji. They have seen the life.
As far as understanding between husband and wife, I'm not sure if jokes are made about this all over the world, but they certainly are in the English language, that from the male point of view, females in general are impossible to understand. And probably from the female side, they have jokes like that also. We only hear from the men's side. It's like a different species or something. And somehow you come together. So that's there also. And speaking from my Mlecha background, you see there are many men who they hardly associate with their wives at all. They work in the day and they come back and they eat something and they go to the pub at night and they go to the football match on Saturday and they don't really see their wife much at all. And the women are all nattering among each other, the famous nattering over the garden fence, and they're like almost like a different species. And even in traditional culture, the men and the women, they wouldn't associate much. There were times of day, the women would come for serving the men meals. They had different sections in the house. And there are certain times they'd associate like that. So good fences make good neighbors also. Maybe not expecting too much, and the husband and wife always have to be with each other all the time. It seems that traditionally the husband and wife didn't associate with each other that much all the time. It may be. Although where I'm staying, just behind me, there's the cow looking after community, and they seem to work together like that. They're with each other a lot of the time because the men, they just come out to the field and then they go back and the women sometimes come out and like this and that. There's some understanding, that's all. All right, Hare Krishna, thank you very much. We can work out by email when we speak again. I'm not sure when that's going to be because I'm planning to be traveling soon. But I hope this will be helpful for others. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyavacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Dante nitai churnakang padaya nipatya kritvacha kakushata metada sadhava sakla Gauranga Chandra Charne Parivada Tujano Yatata Hari Rasa Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna.